Welcome everybody, and we're going to be talking today about refurbishing computers, specifically a Dell Optiplex 9020. You'll need thermal paste remover, some thermal paste, and also a new lithium battery. Of course, we are assuming that the hard drive is ready and the RAM has been tested and ready to go. This segment brought to you by Refresh Computers, where every single computer goes through this process before we sell it to the public. So the first thing we'll do is pop off the cover. All we have to do is flip up on that lever and pull it straight up. We'll take out the optical drive, disconnecting the cables first. We'll disconnect the cables from the hard drive. We'll slide the optical drive out, just like that. And the hard drive cage, we have to slide that lever up, pull it straight up, and out it comes. Next, we'll pull back on the two blue tabs. We'll pull out the shroud that surrounds the heatsink and fan. When unscrewing the heatsink away from the CPU, there is a sequence for which the screws should be unscrewed. Now, these screws are spring-loaded, and in some computers, the screws are even numbered 1 through 4, so you know which sequence to unscrew them and also screw them back down in. If the screws are not numbered, then we will start going diagonally across from the first screw that you unscrewed and do the same thing with the other two screws, which helps to ensure that there's not too much pressure on any one side of the heatsink sitting on top of the CPU. Then we will carefully remove the heatsink and fan away from the CPU and unplugging the fan from the motherboard. We'll take our thermal paste compound and put it on the heatsink, making sure we rub away all of the old crusty thermal paste that's on the heatsink itself. And then we will also put some of the thermal paste remover compound on the top of the CPU, and we will rub that gently with a lint-free cloth until we have removed all of the compound from the CPU. Next, we will apply new thermal paste. We like to put 5 little dots across the top of the CPU, and this way when we reapply the heatsink on top of the CPU carefully, it will evenly distribute the thermal paste on top of the CPU and also on the heatsink. So we'll carefully plug the fan back in, and in the same manner in which we unscrewed the screws, we will screw them back in, keeping in mind to go diagonally across so as not to apply too much pressure on the CPU and on the motherboard. When screwing the screws back in, be sure to apply just enough pressure to get the screws just a little bit tight. Do not over tighten them or you may cause damage to the motherboard and also the CPU. The next step, of course, is to put the shroud back on that surrounds the heatsink and fan. It just snaps right back into place. Now we will replace the Cmos battery. Incidentally, Cmos means complementary metal oxide semiconductor. When refurbishing a computer, it's always important to replace the Cmos battery with a new one. Trust me, you will be thankful that you did, and so will your customers. Now we will insert the hard drive cage. Notice how it just snaps right back in on this model. And then plugging in the cables to the hard drive itself. After the hard drive is installed, we will be sliding the optical drive right back in. It snaps right into place. And then, of course, we will connect the two cables that operate and power the optical drive. They just snap right in, just like they do on the hard drive. And the final step will be testing for full operability of this newly refurbished computer.